rather than being felt decades into the future, will arrive much, much sooner. And Mr. Speaker, this unprecedented commitment to build a world-class railway that delivers for passengers and freight, for towns and cities, for communities and businesses, will benefit 8 out of 10 of the busiest rail corridors across the North and the Midlands, providing faster journeys, increased capacity, more frequent services, up to 10 years sooner than previously planned. And Mr. Speaker, when I became Transport Secretary in 2019, the HS2 project was already about 10 years old. I was concerned that the costs were rising, that newer projects like the Midlands Rail Hub, the Northern Powerhouse Rail, hadn't been fully factored into those plans. And under the original scheme, the HS2 track would not have reached the East Midlands and the North until the early 2040s. Clearly, a rethink was needed to make sure the project would deliver for the regions that it served as soon as possible. And this is how the Integrated Rail Plan was born, a desire to deliver sooner, and so the Prime Minister and I asked Douglas Oakervey to lead that work and make recommendations on the best way forward. One of the key criticisms was that HS2 was designed in isolation from the rest of the transport network. The original plans gave us high-speed lines to the East Midlands, but it didn't serve any of the 3 biggest East Midlands cities, for example. If you wanted to get to Nottingham or Derby, you'd still have to go to Parkway Station and change onto a local tram or train. Oakervey made clear, and a very convincing case, for considering that HS2, as part of an integrated rail plan, should work alongside local, regional and national services. Not just those travelling between our biggest cities, but so we accepted those recommendations and asked the National Infrastructure Commission to develop options. The Commission came back with 2 key suggestions. First, that we adopt a flexible approach, initially setting out a core integrated rail network, but that we remain open to future additions as long as expectations and costs and timing were met. Second, that strengthening regional rail links would be most economically beneficial for the North and the Midlands, connecting towns with main railway networks, bringing hope and opportunity to communities who for too long felt left behind. And that we should bring these benefits to passengers and local economies as soon as possible. These then were the guiding principles behind the integrated rail plan that I'm announcing today. It's an ambitious and unparalleled programme that not only overhauls the intercity links across the North and Midlands, but it also speeds up the benefits for local areas and serves destinations people most want to reach. Mr. Speaker, this new blueprint delivers 3 high-speed lines. First, that's Crewe to Manchester. Second, Birmingham to the East Midlands, with HS2 trains continuing to central Nottingham and central Derby, Chesterfield and Sheffield on an upgraded main line. And third, a brand new high-speed line from Warrington to Manchester and to the western border of Yorkshire, slashing journey times across the north. Mr. Speaker, I know they'll want to hear the detail of those journey times, and they'll also want to explain why their constituents would wish to wait decades more to deliver a journey almost no faster at all than these plans today. So, Mr. Speaker, I've heard some people say that we're just going about, and this is, I think, their point, electrifying the trans-Pennine route. This is wrong. What we're actually doing is investing £23 billion to deliver Northern Powerhouse Rail and the trans-Pennine route upgrade, unlocking east-west travel across the north of England. So in total, this package is 110 miles of new high-speed line, all of it in the Midlands and the north. It's 180 miles of newly electrified line, all of it in the Midlands and the north. I just remind the honourable gentleman that there's 63 miles of electrified line in 13 years. We'll upgrade the East Coast Main Line with a package of investment on track improvements and digital signalling, bringing down journey times between London, Leeds, Darlington, Newcastle and Edinburgh, bringing benefits to the North East much, much sooner than under the previous plans. And it adds capacity and speeds of services over more than 400 miles of lines, the vast majority of it in the Midlands and the North. We'll study how best to take HS2 trains into Leeds as well. And we'll start work on the new West Yorkshire mass transit system, righting the wrong of this major city, probably the largest in Europe, which doesn't have a mass transit system. We commit today to supporting West Yorkshire Combined Authority over the long term to ensure that this time it actually gets done. In short, Mr. Speaker, we're about to embark on one of the biggest single acts of levelling up of any government in history. Well, listen to the numbers. It's 5 times more than was spent on Crossrail. It's 10 times more than was spent on delivering the Olympics. But they still think it's a small package, Mr. Speaker. It will achieve the same, similar or faster journey times to London and on the core Northern Powerhouse network than the original proposals, and will bring the benefits years earlier, as we double, in some cases, triple the capacity. So let me just set out a few of these investments. Rail journeys between Birmingham and Nottingham cut from an hour and a quarter to 26 minutes, city centre to city centre. Journeys between York and Manchester down to 55 minutes from 83 minutes today. Commuters will be able to get from Bradford to Leeds in just 12 minutes, almost half the time it takes today. There'll be earlier benefits for places like Sheffield and Chesterfield. Trips from Newcastle to Birmingham will be slashed by almost 30 minutes, and passengers in Durham and Darlington will benefit from smoother, more reliable trains. As the IRP delivers not just for our largest cities, but also for smaller places and towns. For example, Kettering, Market Harborough, Leicester, Loughborough, Grantham, Newark, Retford, Doncaster, Wakefield, Dewsbury, Huddersfield, Stalybridge, they could all see improvements, electrification and faster services, benefiting in ways that they would not have done under the original HS2 programme. Mr. Speaker, we're not stopping there. Today's plan is about those places which connect and interact with HS2 and Northern Powerhouse Rail. So the scale of ambition, with many of these projects lying outside of the scope. So just yesterday, I opened the first beaching reversal, reversing the beaching axe. And we are going to be doing the same in Northumberland, from Ashington, Blythe, Newcastle line, and many others. We're investing £2 billion in cycling, walking, £3 billion in turn-up-and-go bus services, and tens of billions in our country's roads. So, Mr. Speaker, after decades of decline, with constrained capacity and poor reliability, finally, this plan will give passengers in the North and the Midlands the service they need and they deserve. It's not just about infrastructure. We're going to make train travel much easier as well. And today I can confirm £360 million to reform fares and ticketing, with the rollout of contactless pay-as-you-go ticketing to 700 urban stations, including 400 in the North. Mr. Speaker, this is a landmark plan, by far the biggest of any network improvement, and focused on the North and Midlands. With more seats, more frequent services, shorter journeys, it meets the needs of today's passengers and the future generations, and we're getting started immediately. Today, with another £625 million for the electrification between Liverpool, Manchester and Leeds, bringing the total on the TRU to £2 billion and counting, and £249 million to further electrify the Midland Main Line between Kettering and Market Harborough, with work starting on the integrated rail plan by Christmas, Mr. Speaker. Communities of every size, right across the North and the Midlands, in many cases years earlier than planned, will benefit. By taking a fresh look at HS2 and how it fits with the rest of the rail system, we'll be able to build a much improved railway that will provide similar or better services to almost every destination than the outdated vision drawn up for HS2 over a decade ago. This plan will bring the North and the Midlands closer together. It will fire up economies to rival London and the South East. It will rebalance our economic geography. It will spread opportunity. It will level up the country. It will bring benefits at least a decade or more earlier. And, Mr. Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
We now come to Shadow Secretary of State, Jim McMahon.
Mr. Speaker, can I thank the Secretary of State for advanced sight of this statement, and will be going out shortly to collect the actual plan and to scrutinise it. I'm frankly staggered by the way this statement started, that he was proud to present this to the House. Proud of what? The betrayal of trust, the betrayal of promises, and the betrayal of investment the North of England and the Midlands deserve. Mr. Speaker, we've all seen the reports over the weekend, each one setting out the betrayal being put forward today. And there's no amount of gloss, no amount of spin that can be put on this. He promised HS2 to Leeds. He promised Northern Powerhouse rail. He promised that the North would not be forgotten. But he hasn't just forgotten us, he's completely sold us out. As somebody who lives in Greater Manchester, I'm not going to take lectures on what Northern Powerhouse rail means. We know exactly what it means. We were committing to a new line connecting Manchester and Leeds. And within a month of becoming Prime Minister, Boris Johnson said, I'm going to deliver on my commitment with a pledge to fund Leeds to Manchester. We were promised a new line, Mr. Speaker. He's broken that promise, and he hasn't even got the decency to admit it. Mr. Speaker, let's be clear. The scaling back of Northern Powerhouse rail, coupled with the scrapping of the eastern leg of HS2, is a massive blow for our regions. Both schemes would have created 150,000 new jobs, connecting 13 million people in our major towns, our cities and our industrial heartlands. It was the then Chancellor, George Osborne, who first announced the Northern Powerhouse rail in 2014. Since then, the Conservatives, including the Prime Minister, including the Transport Secretary, have recommitted and repromised 60 times. This is a once-in-a-generation chance to transform opportunity across our whole country, rebalancing the economy and making it work for working people. But that opportunity now looks set to be lost. And it's the very same working people that will likely face a record increase when rail fares go up next year. They'll be paying 50% more to get to work than they did a decade ago, relying on a crumbling, unreliable and overcrowded system that prioritises profit above passengers. And it's the same with buses. Fares up 70%, use down, and not a single one of the 4,000 zero-emission buses promised by the Prime Minister now 3 years ago, not a single one delivered. And what's on offer? £96 billion that we should be grateful for. But let's unpack that. £96 billion, £40 billion of which has already been committed from London to Crewe, but is being labelled as investment across the north of England. And of the £56 billion that remains, let's compare that to what the north of England would have got over the last decade had it had the same investment as London and the South East. And we're still £10 billion short. We are not going to accept crumbs off the table. Labour would reform our transport networks so they work for working people, with investment spread more evenly across the country, so that parents aren't forced to see their children leave the places where they were raised, only to find opportunity that is denied on their own doorstep. Most importantly, Labour will put working people first, using the power of government and the skill of business to ensure good quality jobs are created here in Britain and in every single region. Madam Deputy Speaker, Boris Johnson was elected on a promise to level the playing fields, to make things better for households across the country. We were promised a Northern Powerhouse. We were promised a Midlands engine to be levelled up. But what we've been given today is a great train robbery, robbing the North of its chance to realise its full potential, robbing the next generation of the hope and the opportunity they are due, and robbing 15 million people across the North of the investment that they've been denied for 11 years under this rotten government.
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I just want to make sure I understand the honourable gentleman's approach to this, his lines, as it were, because £96 billion of expenditure, the single biggest ever investment. And we haven't made any secret of the fact that some of that money is already the Birmingham to Crewe line, the Crewe to Manchester line. Last time I checked, that benefits the Midlands and North, doesn't it? That actually is a help. And I realised that he wrote his response there before actually hearing what was in the statement, or decided to ignore it, because there's a brand new high-speed line from Warrington. So I just want to check the geography here. From Warrington to Manchester to west of Yorkshire in Marsden. And yet he doesn't think that that exists by his response. But I'll tell you overall what actually confuses me the most of all by this. It's that the leader of the opposition seems to be in a completely separate place. And I quote, the leader of the opposition said, "I oppose HS2 on cost and merit." So he opposes HS2. It will not achieve its stated objectives. But just for transparency, he did say that in 2015. What's he been saying more recently? He says the government should take this opportunity to cancel HS2. This is the leader of the opposition saying it. So before the honourable gentleman gets carried away, why doesn't he have a word with the leader of his party and work out whether they actually agree with his position on this? Because this is an enormous investment. It will create 3 new high-speed lines. It electrifies track. Just today, nearly 400 miles of track electrification is announced within these programmes. What a contrast, Madam Deputy Speaker. With the 63 miles of track they managed to electrify in 13 years in office. And I just want to finish by talking about the importance of the overall transport approach, because this isn't just about rail, as the honourable gentleman rightly points out. It's also about other means of getting around. You can't get around without a roads programme. We have a 20 billion plus road building programme. They oppose it. They don't want to build any roads. I'm not sure where he wants to run these buses he keeps talking about, but I have already written to him, and I think I'm right in saying sent the letter to the Library of the House, because he will continue to go around saying of these 4,000 buses, none are on the road. That is factually untrue. I've written to him with the detail. 900 of those buses are ordered, many of them already on the road. I know that it is the opposition's job to oppose, but if he is already opposing his opposition leader, then no wonder they don't have a cohesive transport policy.
Chairman of the Transport Select Committee, Hugh Merriman.
Chief Speaker, thank you. The Prime Minister promised that HS2 and Northern Powerhouse rail was not an either-or option. And those in Leeds and Bradford may be forgiven for viewing it today as neither. This is the danger in selling perpetual sunlight and then leaving it for others to explain the arrival of moonlight. Because on a standalone basis, this plan comprises some fantastic projects that will slash journey times and better connect our great northern cities. And for that, the transport team deserve much credit. My question, it costs us in this country £2 million to deliver a single kilometre of electrified track. The Germans can do this for under £500,000 because they have a rolling programme of electrification. What steps has the Secretary of State taken to ensure this new plan can be delivered to time and to this cost?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And my honourable friend's absolutely right. The improvements in journey times. For example, Bradford, which has been talked about a great deal, 12 minutes from Bradford to Leeds. What we called for, what everyone was calling for, is a London or South East style connectivity. 12 minutes between 2 of the North's great cities as a result of this plan is one of those potential upgrades. Not potential, it's in the plan, one of those upgrades. My honourable friend's absolutely right about the cost of electrification. A lot of these things seem to cost a lot more in this country. My honourable friend, the rail minister, is carrying out an electrification challenge to bring the sector in and challenge them to build on electrification much faster than currently happens. And of course, we also have, in addition to electrification, zero-carbon trains, electric trains and hydrogen trains like the Hydroflex, which will also help to resolve some of the more difficult to electrify areas. Though, as I say, we've got full-fat electrification on nearly 400 miles of road as a result of today's plan.
SNP spokesperson Gavin Newlands.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of the statement, although I did read most of it in the newspaper beforehand. But I do admire the Secretary of State's chutzpah for the most bullish U-turn I've yet seen in this place. And he talks of beaching reversals. This is nothing but an HS2 reversal. And bit by bit, HS2 and its grand vision for a rail network that may actually belong in the 21st century rather than the 19th century is being salami-sliced until all that's left is a Birmingham to London shuttle with a few token services to Manchester, benefiting few but costing is all. Perhaps the Secretary of State should ask the French government for some tips on how their high-speed rail network, now 2,800 kilometres long, or the Germans with over 3,000 kilometres. Denmark is building high-speed rail to link with Germany's network, including an 11-mile tunnel under the Baltic Sea. Meanwhile, the UK can't even manage linking itself. And on electrification, the 2015 manifesto promised electrification to Windermere, South Wales and the Midlands, and they were ditched. So forgive me if sceptical that today's promises will not meet the same fate. And for a country that started the railway age and produced Brunel, Stevenson and Joseph Locke, England is now badly served by its transport leadership, a leadership that no number of glossy reports and reviews can paper over. And so can I ask him what implications this will have for Barnett consequences for both Wales and Scotland? Will Wales now receive its fair share of funding if HS2 money is being redeployed elsewhere? And can he confirm that Barnett will also apply to Scotland's funding? Given the Scottish Government are miles ahead of the UK on decarbonisation, electrification and active travel, at least we know something useful will be done with that cash. And perhaps it's time that levelling up applied to the DfT. Move the department up to Newcastle, Carlisle or Doncaster and quickly find out what level the rest of England operates when given a shoestring to run a public transport network that is, in the 21st century, in theory only. Experiencing a third-class network the north of England is expected to endure every day as compared to that in Greater London might sharpen a few minds in the DfT as to where their priorities might lie in the future.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, as you know, the Treasury is going to Darlington. DfT has actually gone to Leeds and Birmingham. We've already got 70 staff up at our Leeds office, and they're going to be delighted to be able to travel around much faster as a result of this plan today. I should mention it involves £12.8 billion of upgrade of the Eastern Core. So this is upgrading the East Coast main line, digital signalling and the like. We're not near capacity on those routes yet. So £12.8 billion will help with the journey up the East Coast. Of course, the plan also today confirms the West Coast update of the HS2 part of it, rather, meaning that journeys to Scotland will be a great deal faster as a result. So there are lots of benefits when it comes to Scotland for bringing these journey times way down as a result of this investment in HS2, and this plan today delivers on that.
Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Secretary of State's statement, which I think was a good balance between what was hoped for and what can actually be achieved. I'm sure it was an oversight that he didn't mention Cleethorpes in his statement. And can he assure me that the restored direct link between Cleethorpes and King's Cross, which is in the LNER draft timetable, will indeed begin hopefully next year, but certainly by 2023? And can he assure me that the east-west freight corridor from the Humber ports is still a priority?
I thank my honourable friend. He's absolutely right. I missed it out of my forward, and I apologise. Cleethorpes certainly should get a mention. We are working, my honourable friend, the Rail Minister, on a Cleethorpes service, potentially direct to London. And with regards to the ports, I was actually visiting just a week or two ago and know the importance of the connectivity with those ports.
Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister repeatedly promised that HS2 and Northern Powerhouse Rail would be built in full. Today that promise has been broken and Leeds and the North have been betrayed. Could the Minister explain, insofar as I understand the details, yet to read the full report, what is the logic in taking HS2 from Birmingham to East Midlands Parkway, building, as I understand it, a new high-speed line from Leeds to Sheffield, but leaving a huge, great big hole in the middle that would have Victorian railway engineers scratching their heads in disbelief to save, well, the Times says, £10.3 billion. What is the purpose in doing that?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think I can reassure the Right Honourable Gentleman as much as one of the purposes of Northern Powerhouse Rail, which we are delivering, is to slash the journey times, for example, from Leeds to Manchester. we will deliver exactly that. We will provide a journey time of 33 minutes from Leeds to Manchester, a significant, very significant improvement, as you'll know. But that's not the only thing. We'll also cut the journey times from Leeds to London to an hour 53. Birmingham will be an hour and a half. So all of these journey times will be coming down dramatically because of the steps that we're taking today. And not only that, we've also announced £100 million to look at the best way to run the HS2 trains into Leeds, as well as to sort out a very long-term problem, which is that Leeds doesn't have a mass transit system. I think the biggest city in Europe without one. There have been many attempts before. We know that over the years. This time we intend to make sure it's followed through. So I think there's a lot for Leeds in this package, and it includes, as it happens, getting Northern Powerhouse rail to run to Leeds, and I hope the honourable gentleman's constituents will feel it benefits them.
Robbie Moore.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Creating economic prosperity across Keighley and indeed the whole of the Bradford district is something which I care deeply about. But of course this is linked to creating better transport connectivity. So I have to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I am deeply disappointed by today's announcement. The Bradford district has been, in my view, completely shortchanged. We are one of the most socially deprived parts of the UK, and we must get better transport connectivity. And I still want to see Northern Powerhouse rail delivered with a main stop in Bradford, so we can unlock our economic opportunities. So can my right honourable friend explain to the House what the government is doing to deliver better, more reliable and cheaper rail services for my constituents in Keighley?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, look, let me just make sure that my honourable friend understands and appreciates the full relevance of today. 12-minute journey from Bradford to Leeds. That's nearly half of the current journey time. 30 minutes off, and probably at least 30 minutes off the Bradford to London journey after these upgrades are complete. And unlike the plans, which were not fleshed out at all, I know that Transport for the North and other people had talked about building all sorts of different versions of this, but one of their versions was indeed the upgrade of the TRU. The problem with these other plans is, no disrespect to my honourable friend, he may well not have been an MP in 2043, or maybe he will have been, to see those things delivered. These advantages that I'm talking about, this 12-minute journey, the 30-minute off the Bradford to London journey, those will be delivered in his first couple of terms as a Member of Parliament.
Catherine McKinnell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Secretary of State knows fine well that the promised integrated infrastructure investment is about capacity as much as travel times. And they're just not being straight as they're asking Northerners to put up with make, do and mend rather than the infrastructure we were promised. Yep. Is it because the government continues to see the North as a problem to solve rather than an opportunity to invest in? And isn't this just another broken promise from this Prime Minister and Chancellor, who have seemingly cancelled levelling up because there are Tories on the line? It appears the Prime Minister is once again driving a train into the ditch off the track on his way to the North.
Madam Deputy Speaker, listening to the Honourable Lady, you would think I'd just come to this dispatch box to announce that Newcastle, for example, will have a longer journey to London, for example. The answer is exactly the opposite. Because of these plans I'm announcing today, the journey from Newcastle to London will be 21 minutes shorter. You would have thought she'd be standing up and welcoming today's massive investment into the train services, which will benefit her constituents. And even if she doesn't appreciate it, I rather suspect her constituents will.
Andrew Jones.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I thank my right honourable friend for this statement. I look forward to reading the detail of the plan. He has given us a complex statement because there are many changes to existing plans, but it's absolutely clear that no government has ever invested on this scale in British history, and he should not listen to any lesson from the party opposite who did nothing on the issue. But however, please can he detail a bit more on the timescales for the delivery? Specifically, when will people in Yorkshire be able to take advantage of the enhanced services that he's talking about? And can he comment a little bit further as well on the environmental benefits? I'm particularly thinking about the improved clearances for rail freight.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, just actually on the environmental advantages, I'm interested in the House to know that, of course, with HS2, it's been built in as environmentally friendly way as possible. Section 2B West is actually intended to be a net positive carbon contribution, not just in its running, but in its entire life cycle, which is going to be very important. I thought I'd refer the House and my honourable friend to pages 134 and 135, which contains a full timescale for when the various different benefits will arrive at different locations. In every case, these advantages will start arriving much, much sooner than under the original plans. And for all those people who say we just should have carried on ploughing on with the original HS2 plan, they then need to explain why it was right to wait till the 2040s for their constituents to feel the benefits. This way, the benefits will be started to be felt by this Christmas, where the work gets underway on the Midland Main Line and is already underway on the trans-Pennine route.
Liam Byrne.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I just want to follow up my right honourable friend for Leeds Central. I just want to understand the new East-West division that the Secretary of State has set out today. So, as I understand it, our constituents moving from Leeds to Manchester will travel by high-speed train south of Leeds, then change trains to get a train to Nottingham Parkway, and then get on a new high-speed train from Nottingham Parkway to Birmingham. I think that's what the Secretary of State has set out. Madam Deputy Speaker, since we approved this plan in Cabinet, China has built 23,500 miles of high-speed line. This Tory government has built none. We've had a review every year. He's just destroyed the plans, but hundreds of millions of pounds in Birmingham is predicated on being at the heart of a network, not a mishmash. How can we now believe the plan that he set out?
Should point out, Madam Deputy Speaker, that China do not have the same health and safety approach as us. They have a slightly different view of how many people it's acceptable to kill per mile of track laid, and I don't think he's seriously considering we go down that route. I know that he represents a Birmingham constituency. I know that the Mayor of the West Midlands has widely and broadly welcomed this package. Birmingham does it very well out of it. The connection, which wasn't initially envisaged within the HS2 plan, between the biggest cities in the Midlands, Birmingham and Nottingham, for example, will now be complete with not just a Parkway station, but stations into the city centre of Nottingham, into the city centre of Derby, and connecting Birmingham. So it's going to be fantastic news for his constituents. He asked about trains. No, people won't be changing the trains. They'll be on the same train all the way through the path.
Sir William Cash.
I did not hear the Secretary of State mention the stretch between Birmingham and Crewe, which cuts straight through my constituency from top to bottom, causing massive misery to my constituents. Would my right honourable friend confirm that discussions have taken place to improve the situation, and will he and his Minister of State commit to continue to listen to the proposed solutions which would mitigate this misery and help to solve the problems faced by my constituents?
Well, it's absolutely right that HS2 has had a big impact on a lot of communities, or does as it is built. And, of course, the advantages in different places are different for different members and their constituents. So I'm absolutely delighted to assure my right honourable friend that he can continue to work with the HS2 Minister, who has done wonders to improve the relationship between the communities and try to bring some benefits, even where there aren't stops necessarily, to communities along the HS2 line through some of the community funds and other things. And I'll recommit to that to my honourable friend today.
Dame Diana Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It was 5 years ago on Tuesday since Tory ministers blocked the privately financed rail electrification to Hull, and not one mention today of the great city of the North, Hull, and the economically important area of the Humber. Now, can the Secretary of State explain why passengers in Hull who pay more for their train tickets and get a poorer service will have to wait even longer now, because I can't see anything in the detail of the Prime Minister delivering on his promise for Northern Powerhouse rail. In the Hull and the Humber area, levelling up means absolutely nothing.
Is the honourable lady be right?
Well, we're going to leave that statement there from the Transport Secretary, in spite of his claim that he will the government's new plans will result in faster journey times across the network, and he says 110 miles of new high-speed track and 180 new miles of electrified line. I think it's fair to say that the reception on both sides of the House was pretty poor. The big concern is that the link going up to Leeds is no longer going to be there from HS2, and also that there's not going to be a new line between Leeds and Manchester. So very unhappy there, particularly MPs on both sides from Bradford and Leeds. Well, with me is our political correspondent, Rob Powell. Rob, why has the government, which promised repeatedly to do both those things, have a new line between Manchester and Leeds and also to have HS2 going east? Why has the government cancelled all this?
I think partly it's because of time and partly because of money. Time-wise, you heard from Grant Shapps there that he wants to try and accelerate the delivery of this, and they believe that by concentrating partly on new track but partly on upgrading existing track, they can, as they see it anyway, bring the benefits sooner than it would have under the original HS2 plan, and then partly money as well, because the Northern Powerhouse Partnership's done the sums on this and has found that they are taking a considerable amount out of what they originally promised. I think we're going to need to see some of the detail about what these exact plans will mean, not just for journey times, but also for capacity as well. Because, as you say, there's three main announcements that the government have made. The first, as expected, was the Crewe to Manchester HS2 line, which will go ahead. Then we find out that the full eastern leg of HS2 that was supposed to run up through an East Midlands hub near Nottingham, that will carry on, but then there will be HS2 trains on existing track going up to Sheffield, and then just the promise of a study to find out how to get high speed into Leeds. And then on that east-west link, what's sometimes called Northern Powerhouse rail, that will not be a completely new track between Manchester and Leeds. There will only be new track running from Warrington through Manchester to Marsden in West Yorkshire, and then there will be upgrades on the rest of the track. Now, the government says on that east-west link, actually, in terms of journey times, it'll only be 2 or 3 minutes slower than it originally planned. And they're also claiming as well that there'll be double capacity as well. And I think that's the part of this that, on the whole, is getting people wondering about how you can still deliver on vastly increased capacity without building completely new lines. Because the problem with running fast trains and slow trains on the same line is that you do get issues with capacity. And if you can segregate the lines and put the high-speed trains down one line and the stopping services, the slower trains on another line, you get substantial increases on capacity. So I think that promise of whether capacity can be doubled running across from Manchester to Leeds is something we will need to look at in the integrated rail plan when that's published. I haven't seen it online yet. I've only got a press release as it stands. In terms of the reaction, you did hear stormy reaction from both sides. I think there may well be some. It's not gone unnoticed that some of the originally planned eastern leg of the high-speed line would run through a lot of newly won Conservative seats without them seeing much benefit of it. So you wonder whether that whether that will factor into the political calculation on the part of the government. The danger, I guess, is that if the headline from this is that this is not what was promised, this is less than what is promised, it doesn't look good for their promises on levelling up.
Worth noting that the Conservative MP Hugh Merriman, who is the chair of the Transport Select Committee, has criticised the government, saying this is the danger of selling perpetual sunlight and leaving it to someone else to explain moonlight. Well, joining us now is the former chair of the National Infrastructure Commission, also, of course, former Labour Transport Secretary, Andrew Adonis. Lord Adonis, thank you very much indeed for being with us. What do you make of these new plans for rail in the north of England from the government?
Well, it's a betrayal of the promises that the government made to the north of England, because they were going to get high-speed rail going both to Manchester and to Leeds.